Hello. As you can see, today I'll be talking about Age of Mythology, the board game. I think this was modeled after the video game. I think the video game came out first, and then this board game came out. I believe it was in 2003. I didn't get it till somewhere around 2012 or 2013. I bought it used. But anyway, let's talk about how to set up and play. So let's get started with setup. Alright, there's three cultures to play. You've got the Greek, the Norse, and the Egyptian. So first thing you'll do, for each player, you'll place a blue, brown, or green. If you're playing three players, you place a green to represent Greek, blue to represent Norse, and brown to represent Egyptian. Put them in a cup or a bag or the box top or something like that. Each player draws randomly, and whichever cube that they get, then that's the color that matches the civilization that they'll play for the game. After you've chosen your cultures you're going to play, then each player will roll 2 dice, and the person who rolls highest will be the starting player. And they will take the starting player token. Each player will then take the deck of random action cards, battle cards, and permanent action cards that goes with their culture, along with their player board and their pieces. You'll then determine the resources in the bank, the number of resources depending on the number of players. In a 3-player game that I'm setting up for, you'll have 25 of each resource, which is favor, gold, food, and wood. And there will always be 30 red victory point cubes no matter how many players there are. You'll then, from that bank, you'll give each player 4 starting resources of wood, gold, food, and favor. You can then reference this sheet that shows the different types of units that each culture has, and each culture will receive 2 of each of their mortal units. So for instance here the Norse have the Jarl mortal cavalry, the throwing axemen, they're mortal, and the Huskarl mortal. So they'll receive 2 of each of those. And so for instance here I've got 2, these are the Jarls or Jarls, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. 2 of the throwing axemen and 2 of the Huskarls. The mortal units will always have a round or oval base, whereas the myth type units like the Frost Giant will always have a rectangular base, like so. And the hero units, like this Norse hero, always have a triangular base. So your starting units, and anytime you have units and resources, they stay up in this top area of your player board. That's the holding area. The Egyptians will start with 2 spearmen, 2 elephants, and 2 chariot archers. And again, you can see they have an oval type base or a round base for mortal units. And the Greeks will start with 2 hoplites, 2 hippocons, and 2 toxotes or toxotes. I don't know how you pronounce that exactly. But anyway, 2 of each of their mortal units. Then you separate and place all the building tiles somewhere within reach of the players. It says to place these resources face down with the basket side up in a pile in the middle of the table and mix them up. I like to just put them in this bag so they can be drawn out. Anyway, there's quite a few of them. But if you don't have a bag or a cup or something to put them in, then you flip them all with the basket side up and put them in the middle of the table. Then whoever is your starting player will remove or flip over 6 resource tiles for each player in the game. So in a 3-player game, a total of 18. So I'll do that by just drawing them out of the bag and turning them face up. So let me get 18 of those out. Then starting with the first player, he'll choose one of the resource tiles and place it on a matching terrain type on his board. For instance, maybe he chooses this one with forest with 2 wood. He has to put it on a forest area on his board, so maybe here. Then the next player in clockwise order selects one of the remaining tiles for his area, so maybe the Egyptian here, he takes this one for 2 favor and puts it in a desert area. And then finally it's the Greek's turn, and maybe he takes this mountains with 2 gold and puts it in a mountain space. Now, when all players have chosen a tile, then the person who chose last then selects another tile, and it goes backwards counterclockwise. So now the Greek player would select a different tile. So maybe he would choose this desert and put it in his one desert spot. Now, not all the player boards are not all the same. You'll see the Egyptian has more desert spots. The Greek player has more hill spots, and the Norse player has more mountain spots. So anyway, so now we'll go back the other way. So now the Egyptian player would choose one. So maybe he would take this fertile and put it in a fertile spot on his board, and then we'd be back to the Norse player. And maybe he would choose this fertile and put it in a fertile spot. And now it's his turn to choose again. And you go back and forth this way until each player has had 6 opportunities to choose a tile. You can, when it comes your turn, you can pass, but then you've lost that opportunity to choose a tile. So let me go on and finish choosing the tiles for these players. So after you finish choosing, if any tiles are left, they just go back, flip back over if you're flipping them over on the board, or back into your bag or cup or whatever you're using. The reason you may want to pass is you may not, if you've only got like one hill spot left or one swamp spot left, you may want to wait till later in the game when you hope you can get a tile that has more resources on it to fill that one spot. But anyway, after all players have chosen or passed, move on to the next step, which is just to lay out these victory cards somewhere on the table within reach of all players. And at this point, I think we're all set up. You need to put the dice somewhere. I don't think that's mentioned in the rules, but put the dice somewhere nearby. And I think we're all set up and ready to go over how to play. I did want to mention before we get started with how to play that you can play with 4 players, but although there's only Norse, Greek, and Egyptian cultures in the game, there is another set of 3 boards, so a 4th player can also be either Norse, Greek, or Egyptian. But if you have a 4th player, and so 2 players are sharing the same culture, then they cannot sit next to each other. They have to sit opposite each other, and they'll have to share the random deck of cards between them. They'll each have their own permanent set of action cards, but they'll have to share the random deck and the battle cards. And they can never attack each other. You can only attack a culture to your right or to your left. So players sharing the same culture could never attack each other. Now the game, according to the rules, says it can be played with more than 4 players, but it requires purchasing other components. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm only going to talk about what came in the box. But we'll just be showing a 3-player game here. So again, let's get started with how you play. Alright, so the game is played in turns. Each turn consists of several phases. There's the placement of victory point cubes. the action card draw, then 3 rounds of action card play, followed by resource spoilage, discarding, and rotating the starting player token. So let's start with the first phase, which is placement of victory point cubes. So in the place victory points cube phase, the first player will draw 1 victory point cube, and he'll place it on one of the cards, either the most buildings, the largest army, won the last battle, and the wonder. And at the end of the game, the player who has the most buildings in their city will get all the victory point cubes on the most buildings. The player who has the largest army will get all the victory point cubes on that card. The only one, the wonder, whoever builds the wonder will get any cubes on that. And during the game, whoever wins the last battle where there's victory cubes on there will claim those during the game. So this is the only one that they're claimed during playing of the game. These others are all claimed at the end of the game. But anyway, starting with the first player, he'll take 1 cube and place it on one of the cards. So maybe he's going to try to go for largest army, so he plays there. So then the next player in clockwise order will choose one, and he places it on one of the cards. It could be the same one or a different one, so maybe he puts it on the most buildings. And then the next player will choose one, and maybe he puts it on won the last battle. If there's only ever 3 victory point cubes put out per turn, so if you do happen to be playing with 4 players, then the 4th player will not get to choose and place a cube. If you're only playing with 2 players, then you only draw 2 cubes and place them. All right, next is the action card draw. You'll do this according to which age you're in. You all start in the ancient age. Well, these boards call it the ancient age. But in the rule book, it's called the archaic age. So I guess, anyway, they're equivalent. So either the ancient age or archaic age. And all players start in that age. And so in that age, you can only draw 4 cards. Now later, you can advance to the next age, which would be classical. And when you're in that age, you can draw 5 cards in this phase. If you get to the heroic age, you can draw 6 cards. And in the mythic age, you can draw 7. But beginning of the game, everybody's in the ancient or archaic age, and you can draw 4 cards. Now, when you're drawing cards, you can always choose from your 7 permanent action cards, and these say permanent. So you can take as many, of the 4 that you can draw from those permanent action cards, or you can draw some of them from the random deck. So these random decks, I don't think I mentioned, but they're shuffled at the beginning of the game. But your permanent action cards you can pick up and look at. They've all of them for each culture are the same. You've got trade, attack, build, recruit, explore, gather, and next age. And the cards in the random deck will be similar. They'll be one of these things, gather, build, attack, but they'll be a little more powerful. The thing is, when you're drawing from the random, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know if you're getting a gather or a build or recruit or next age. So if you want a guaranteed something, you draw from the permanent. But if you want to take a chance, you draw from the random, because again, they'll be one of these same type of cards, but they'll have a little bit more powerful effect. So let's go over what each of the type of cards are. So let's first look at the Explore card. So if you were to play an Explore card, it says you draw 1 more tile than the number of players, and that's from your resource tokens. So if you were to play that card on your turn, which we haven't gotten to the playing the cards yet, but after you draw your action cards, then you'll take turns playing these cards. And so I want to go through what each of these type of cards are. So again, the basic permanent explore card is draw one more tile than the number of players. So if you played that, you're playing a 3-player game, you would draw or flip over 4 tiles. Oops, 2, 3, 4. And then the player who played that card would get to choose one of those tiles and place it into their resource area, or it's actually called the production area of the board. So they would choose one, that matches one of the types they have available and put it on their board. Or they can pass and decide not to choose one. So maybe he chooses this one, puts it in the swamp. Then the next player in clockwise order, even though he didn't get to play the card, he gets to choose one of the remaining, and then the next player in clockwise order gets to choose one of the remaining ones. Again, if they want to, you can pass and not choose one. Any remaining, then just go back in the bag. And I just wanted to mention that once a tile is placed, you can't choose another tile and replace one that's placed there. So it's pretty much there permanently unless an attack on that player removes something, or the use of a card effect allows you to remove one. But otherwise, once you've placed it, it's there permanently, and you can't replace it with another one when you do explore. Alright, the next type of card we'll talk about is the Gather card by resource type or terrain. So a player that plays this card gets to choose to gather resources from those he has in his production area, and he can choose by resource type. So he can say, food, or I'm going to gather food, or I'm going to gather wood, or favor. Or he can say a terrain type. So he may say, I'm going to gather in the mountains. So in any case, if you say you're going to do it by resource type, like in this example, if he chose food, well, he would get to gather 2 food. So he would take 2 food from the supply and put it onto his holding area on his board. If he said by mountains, then he would get to gather the resources that are on each mountain tile he has. In this case, it would be 1 wood, 2 wood. So he would get to take 2 wood from the supply and put it into his holding area. But then the next player in clockwise order gets to also gather, but they have to use the same resource type or terrain that the player that played the card chose. So if the player that played the card chose mountains, he would gather from mountains. Then the next player in clockwise order would have to gather from mountains. He doesn't have any, so he wouldn't get to get anything. Then the next player would get to gather. He would get to gather 2 gold and put it in his play area. So when you play a gather card, you get to, the person that played the card gets to gather their resources first, but then each player in clockwise order also gets to gather resources according to whatever you chose. There's some more information on gather, but we'll get to that when we talk about building tiles later. Alright, the next type of card, permanent card, is build, and it has a number 1, which means you can build 1 building. And the cost to build these buildings can be seen here. For instance, to build a house costs you 2 wood and 2 food. So again, you can build any 1 building. You can't build the Wonder until you've reached the Mythic age, but any other building you can build in any age as long as you have the resources to build it. So for instance, a wall costs 3 wood and 3 gold. And again, you have to have those resources in your supply. So let's look over at the building tiles and see what they get you. So if you build a house, you take a house tile, put it in your city, and it says villager. So you'd get to get one of your villager figures, and you place that in your holding area. And here's where I said we would talk about a little more about gather. if you have villagers in your holding area, or already in your production area, whenever you play a gather card, you can take a villager from your holding area or one that you already have on your production area and move it or place it in your production area. Then whenever you gather that resource, you get one extra of that resource. So if this guy built a house and he put this villager here, well, he would put it here. Then later, when he played a gather card, he would get to place it on one of his resource tiles. And then if he said, he was going to gather wood, well, he would get 1, 2, 3, 4 because there's 2 on that, plus 1 extra one for having a villager on there. So any resource tile in your production area that has a villager on it, you get 1 extra of that resource when you gather it. Now, only the person who plays the gather card gets to take villagers out of his holding area and place them onto tiles in his production area, or move, if you play a gather card and you've got villager here, you can move them to different tiles, but only the person that plays the gather card does that. If this person played the gather card and then you're gathering, depending on what choice they made after they went, you don't get to place villagers you have in your holding area or move villagers you have in your production area. Now, if you have villagers on tiles from a previous time where you got to place them because you played a gather card, then you still get to gather that extra resource from whatever tile they are on. But that's what a house does if you build a house. If you build a quarry, then in future turns, not on the same turn that you build a quarry, but in future turns, the resource cost of building a building is -1. So instead of costing 3 wood and 3 gold to build a wall, you could spend 2 wood and 3 gold, or 3 wood and 2 gold. And again, to build the quarry, it would cost you 1 gold and 4 food, and then you would just take the quarry tile and put that in your city, and you can put 1 tile in each, or 1 building in each square in your city, but then you have that permanently unless that building is destroyed later from a player attacking you. If you build a siege workshop, it negates walls and towers. Well, we haven't talked about those yet, but we will in a little bit. And you get to destroy 1 extra building. We haven't talked about battles yet, but when you are attacking a player, you choose an area on the board you're attacking, either their production area, city area, or their holding area. So if you're attacking their city area and you win the battle, then you get to destroy 1 of their buildings. If you have the siege workshop, you get to destroy an extra building. All right, the storehouse, you can store 8 resource cubes. We haven't talked about spoilage yet, but at the end of it, when you're getting to the end of the turn, you have the spoilage phase, and you can only keep 5 of each resource that you have on your player board in your holding area. But if you have and you have to discard any excess. But if you have the storehouse, you can actually keep 8 instead of 5. All right, if you build the wall, if a player is attacking your city area, you get to roll 2 extra dice in battles. But again, if the player attacking you has the siege workshop, then it ignores that 2 extra dice defense. An armory lets you add 1 extra unit in battle, so we haven't talked about battle yet, but an attack card usually specifies a number of units that you can bring to the battle. If you have the armory, you can bring 1 additional. The wood workshop, whenever you're gathering wood, you get to gather 2 extra wood. The gold mint, similar, except for when you're gathering gold, you get to get 2 extra gold. Grain is similar, but you get to get 2 extra food. If you have the granary, sorry. The market is, you get to do free trade. We haven't talked about trade yet. We'll do that here shortly. The tower, similar to the walls, if a player is attacking your production area And you have the tower. You get to roll 2 extra dice in each battle. The monument, again, in the gather phase, you get 2 extra favor when you're gathering favor. The Great Temple, you get to trade 8 favor for 1 victory point. So if you play a trade card, one of the things you can do is trade. You do the regular trade, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will here in a minute. And then you can trade up 8 favor for a victory point cube. And finally, the Wonder. If a player builds the Wonder, then the game ends immediately, and the player who built the Wonder gets all the victory point cards that are on the Wonder card. So again, that's the build card, and it will specify how many buildings you can build. So with the permanent build card, you can just build 1 building. All right, the next card we talk about is the Recruit, and it will specify a number of units you can recruit. Again, the permanent Recruit card lets you recruit 2 units. And you can look at these battle cards for the cost. There's one for each type of unit. Or you can just refer to this reference sheet. And again, if you wanted to recruit a Jarl, it would cost you 1 food and 1 gold. If you wanted to recruit a Troll, it would cost you 3 food and 2 wood. So again, this recruit card lets you recruit any 2 units. The only type of units you can't recruit off of this sheet, as long as you can afford them, is the hero units. You can't recruit any of the heroes till you advance at least to the classical age. And in the classical age, you can recruit this hero. Once you're in the heroic age, you can recruit this hero and this hero. And once you're in the mythic age, you could recruit this hero or this hero, or this hero and or this hero. But anyway, when you're recruiting, you just pay the cost for the unit type you want to recruit, and then you put it into your holding area. All right, the next type of action you can take, again, this is the permanent action card. You can do a trade action, but it costs you 2. Before you do the trade, it costs you any 2 resource cubes. And then you can trade any resource cubes you have in your holding area for an equal number of a different resource cubes from the supply. So I could take a 2 wood and 2 favor and trade that for 2 food and 2 gold, or 4 food for 4 gold or something like that. So you can't trade with other players, but you can trade any resources you have for different resources from the supply. But again, it has a cost, and the permanent card, it costs you 2 resource cubes before you can do the trade. Now, there's some trade cards in the random deck that maybe only costs you 1 resource cube, and if you have the market, then you get to trade for free. It doesn't cost you any resource cubes before doing the trade. Alright, the next action you can take is the next age, and that's pretty simple. That's to advance to the next age. When you're advancing from the ancient or archaic age to the classical age, it costs you 4 of each resource. You play that, pay 4 of each resource, and then you move to the next age. So you'll be in the classical age, and of course then you'll be able to recruit the classical hero, and when you do the draw card step, you get to draw 5 cards instead of 4. And then once you're in the classical age, of course, you can advance to the heroic age. It costs you 5 of each resource, and mythic age costs you 6 of each resource. And there are next age cards in your random deck that may cost you less of each resource to advance to the next age. And you're supposed to denote which age you are in with a cube or a unit, the place to show which age you're in, or Or you can do something like that. I found this on the Board Game Geek, I think, files section, where you could just print out something uh, that shows what age you're in and put that in your play area, and it also kind of has a turn sequence and hand size. You're supposed to actually make a standee out of it, but I didn't print it on the proper kind of paper. But anyway, some method to denote which age you're in. And finally, we have the attack card, and it shows the number of units you can attack with. Again, this is the permanent action card. Some from the random action deck will have uh, more units that you can attack with, and some cards have special god powers. We haven't talked about that yet, but let's finish with the attack. So if you play an attack card, again, this number here shows how many units from your supply you can attack with. You have to specify an opponent you're attacking. Again, you can only attack opponent to your left or to your right. So in a 4-player game, you could not attack the person sitting across from you, as they would be the same culture as you. And when you specify which opponent you're attacking, you also have to specify which area you're attacking, either their holding area, in which you'll get to if you successfully win the battle and you've attacked their holding area, you get to take 5 of their resource cubes. If you are attacking a player's city area and you successfully win the battle, then you can remove one of the buildings they have in their city area. And we've seen if you have the siege workshop, then you get to remove 2 buildings from their city area. If you attack a player's production area and you successfully win the battle, you get to choose one of their resource tiles and remove it from their production area and put it in the appropriate space in your production area. So if you decide to take the mountain tile, you could put it on one of your open mountain spaces. If you decide to take one of their tiles and not put it, you cannot put it into your production area and just put it back into the draw pile. So when you play the attack card, again, you'll choose an enemy and what area, or an opponent, and what area on their board you're attacking, holding area, city area, or production area. And then they get to take the same number of units as you. Now, of course, if either side has the armory, they get to add an extra unit into the battle. But at that point, if you played this card, both players would secretly choose 4 of the units that they're going to take into the battle. And when both players are ready, they'll reveal them simultaneously and show which 4 units they're taking to the battle. So, for example, maybe this guy's going to take a Huskarl, a Throwing Axeman, and 2 Jarls for his 4 units. So he would select those and keep it hidden until the opponent's ready to reveal which units he's taking. So maybe this guy's going to take 2 Hoplites, a Hippocon, and a Taxote. Alright, so they both reveal this is what they're taking. Then they find the appropriate battle cards that match the units for the units they're taking. So, for example, the Greek player would find the battle card for his Taxote archers, his hoplites, and his hippocons. And the Norse player would find his battle cards for his throwing axemen, his jarls, and his huskarls. Then each player will secretly select one of the battle cards that they're going to use in this round of battle. So, maybe this guy is going to use the Jarl. He's a mortal cavalry, and if he gets to roll 3 dice, standard roll of 3 dice. But if he's going against a hero unit, he'll get 4 extra dice, or if he's going against archer units, he gets 4 extra dice. So he selects which one he's going to use and puts it face down in front of him. The opponent would do the same, so maybe he selects his Toxotes. That's a mortal archer. He gets plus 4 dice versus flying units and plus 3 dice versus warriors. So he'll put that face down in front of him. Both players simultaneously reveal which battle card they chose. Then players determine the number of dice they're going to get to roll. So in this case, he gets a standard base roll of 3. And since the Toxotes is an archer, he gets 4 additional dice. So he'll get to roll 7 dice. The Toxotes gets a bonus versus flying or warriors. This is a mortal cavalry, so no bonus, so he'll just get to roll 3 dice. So then both sides will roll their dice. A 6 is a hit. Whoever gets the most 6s on their roll wins that encounter, and the opponent who lost eliminates one of those units. So if, well, we'll just do an example. So we determine the Jarl gets to roll 7 dice. So he got 2 6s, so that's 2 hits, 2 successes. The archer just gets to roll 3 dice. He got no hits, so he loses this encounter. And the Greek player would have to eliminate one of his Toxotes, and he only brought 1 into the battle. This would go back into his supply, not back into his holding area, because that unit was eliminated. If both players had rolled the same number of 6s or successes, then they would each just roll again until one of them gets more successes than the other. If both sides want to continue the battle, then they return their cards to their hand. Now, this card wouldn't be available anymore because now he only has Hoplites and Hippocon, so he could just put this back with his other battle cards. But this guy would return his Jarl to his hand of battle cards and select, then each player would select a card for which unit they're going to bring next. He could select the Jarl again since he still has it, or he could choose a different. And of course the Greek player would have to select one of the 2 remaining unit types he brought to the battle, so either a Hippocon or Hoplite. But they would do that and roll again, determine the number of dice, roll again. So this continues until either one player runs out of units he brought to the battle, or until one player decides they want to retreat. So either player can decide to retreat at the beginning of any round of the battle. In fact, even before the first round of battle, before battle cards are revealed for which units are participating in that round of battle, a player can decide they're retreating, and then they just return any remaining units to their holding area. The player who did not retreat is victorious, and so if that's the attacking player, then he gets to depending on the area he was attacking, if he was attacking the holding area, he gets to take 5 resources. If he was attacking the production area, he gets to take a tile and put it on his board. If he's attacking the city area, he gets to destroy 1 building in that player's city. If the attacking player ends up retreating, then the defending player doesn't get anything, but the attacking player obviously doesn't get to do whatever he was going to do if he was successful in the attack. And of course, if one player just doesn't retreat, but ends up running out of units, then the other player wins the battle. Whoever won the battle, either side, does get to take the victory points that are on the one last battle card, if there are any. So that is all the different types of actions, and that's the permanent action cards. Some of the random action cards may have, if you look at the bottom and there's a cost in favor here, then that card has a god power. So this is a trade action, and you can see you could do the trade action at a cost of 0 resources, whereas the basic action, the permanent action card, it costs you 2 resources to do the trade action. But it also has this god power where you have the option to pay 2 favor and then do whatever the power here is first. So steal 5 resources from any single opponent. You always do the god power optional, and you always do that before you do the actual action of the card. So you would do this god power first, and then you could do the trade action. And so some of these other random cards that have other actions may have a god power on them also, and they just vary in what they do. Alright, so we've gone over all the different actions and the buildings. So let's get back to where we were in the phases. So again, the first phase is place victory point cubes on the cards up here. So starting with the first player, he'll place one, then the next player in turn order will place one, and then the next player will turn one. Then you go to the draw cards phase, where each player will draw up to the number of cards depending on what age they're in. At the beginning of the game, that's 4. So you can pick up and look at permanent action cards, select whatever permanent action cards you want. Like, for instance, maybe you know for sure you want to gather, and you know for sure you want to explore. So you choose whatever permanent action cards you want first, and once you've decided that, so I know I want to do these 2 things, so I've chosen 2 permanent action cards. Well, I still have 2 more cards I can draw, so I just have to take 2 off my deck of random action cards and see what I got. So I got 2 attacks. This one is attack with 5 units, and this one's 6. So I got 2 attack 5s. So if I didn't want to attack, I would be kind of in a pickle, at least with one of those cards. Anyway, so that's the draw phase. Each player draws up to the number of cards depending on what age they're in. And again, you have to take whatever cards you're taking from the permanent action deck first, then you can draw from the random. Then you have 3 rounds of action card play. So starting with the first player, he chooses one of his cards, plays it in front of him, and does that action. So in this case, explore. So he would draw one more tile, resource tile, than the number of players. We've gone over what the explore action is. Then the next player, clockwise, would play one of his cards, and then the next player would play one of his cards. Then you'd come back to the first player, and he would play one of his remaining cards, and around like that until each player has played 3 cards. Now you can pass and just discard a card if you when it comes to your turn. If you don't want to take an action, you can just pass and discard a card. Now when you're discarding a permanent card, you just put it back on the permanent with the rest of your permanent cards. When you're discarding a random card, you place it face up at the bottom of your random action card deck. If you've ever go to draw a card from your random action deck and all the face up cards are there's no more face down, then you just shuffle that deck and continue to draw that way. Once each player has had the chance to play 3 of their action cards, then we go to the spoilage phase, which I've kind of talked about already. Each player will check if they have more than 5 of each resource. Any excess they have of that resource has to go back to the supply. So if he had 6 favor, he would have to return 1 of them to the supply. Again, if you have the storehouse, you can have 8 of each resource instead of 5. Next, we go to the discard phase, in which you determine if you want to discard any remaining cards of your hand Since you only play 3 cards each round, you should always have at least 1 card left in your hand. Now, if it's a permanent cards in your hand, there's no reason not to discard them, because you can always, in the draw card phase, you can always pick up all those permanent action cards and decide which one you want. But if you have random card in your hand, it may be one you want to use for a future round. So you may not want to discard it, or it may be one that you don't think you're going to use in the next round, so you do discard it. So anyway, go to the discard phase. All players decide any remaining cards in the hand if they want to keep them or discard them. But remember, when you go to the draw cards phase, you can only draw up. So if you had one card in your hand when you got to the draw card phase, if you're in the ancient or archaic phase, you would only draw 3 cards because you can only have a maximum of 4 in your hand. After the draw cards phase, you rotate the starting player token clockwise. And then you start a new turn, starting with the new starting player, choosing a victory point cube and placing it on one of the cards, and then the next player choosing one, and so forth, and then you play through a new round. So you continue to play like that until one of 2 things occurs. As soon as somebody builds the wonder, then that ends the game immediately, and again the player that built the wonder would take any victory point cubes. Or the game ends at the turn in which the last victory point cube has been placed on the card. So if you're placing 3 per round, it should, last a maximum of 10 turns because you start with 30 cubes, but there may be less because people can get victory points. If they have the Great Temple, they can trade 8 favor for a victory point. So it might be less than 10 turns of the game, but a maximum of 10. So again, the game will end at the end of a turn. So you'll place the victory point cubes that are, when the last of the victory point cubes are taken from the supply and placed on cards, then you'll play through a whole turn of, placing the victory point cubes, drawing cards, playing 3. Each player takes turn playing 3 actions. There will be no, then the game will end. There would not be a spoilage phase at the game end in that case. Whichever effect the wonder being built or the game ending because the last victory point cube was placed on the cards and that turn ended, then whichever way the game ends, then the player who had the most buildings would take all the victory point cubes on there. The player who has the largest army in their holding area would take all the victory point cubes there. The won the last battle, that nobody gets those at the game end. It's just whoever won the last battle always gets those. And again, if somebody built the wonder, they would have taken those cubes. Then players add up their victory point cubes. Each one is worth 1 point. Whoever has the most points is the winner. If there's a tie, then the tiebreaker is whoever has the most resource cubes is the winner. So that's it. It's a pretty simple game, actually. Let's get things. I think I'm set back up to how I was at the beginning. So let's go through a few example turns. Right, I believe I've got everybody set back up to how we were right after setup. Norse player is first player, so we're at the place victory cube step, so he's going to go with largest army. Egyptian player now gets to draw a victory cube and place it. He thinks he's going to put it on one last battle. And the Greek player, well, he thinks he's going to try to go for building the wonder, so he's going to put one on the wonder. Alright, so now we go to action card draw, so all players can do this simultaneously. So we'll just say, we'll see what each player wants to do. Let me do that off camera. Alright, the Norse player he picked up his permanent action cards and he chose Explore and Recruit because he knows he wants to do that. So now he's just going to draw 2 random cards and see what he gets. Alright, so that's his hand. He got a gather. Oh, he gets to gather all resources. And he got a next stage, which lets him do that at a lower cost. So he may want to do that. So we'll see. But he's got his hand of cards. The Greek player is taking 3 permanent cards. He's taking a Build, Gather, and Explore because he knows he wants to do those, and then he's going to draw 1 random, and let's see what he gets. A Build. So he may use that instead of his permanent one. And the Egyptian player, he's just going to be bold, and he's just going to draw 4 random and see what he gets. See if that paid off for him. He got an Explore, an Attack, and 2 Recruits. So if he doesn't want to recruit, he's didn't do too good, but his Explore and Attack may be better than the basic. So we'll see. Alright, so everybody's done their draw action card step. Of course, these cards would be in your hand and hidden from other players, but since I'm playing solo, I'm just having to set them down on my board here. Alright, now we have the 3 rounds of action card play. So starting with the first player, he'll choose 1 card and play it. He got this random action card that lets him advance for only 3 of each resource to the next stage. So I think he's going to do that. So he's going to play that. So he's got to pay 3 of each resource, 3 favor, 3 food, 3 wood, and 3 gold. And so now he's advanced to the classical age, and we can just mark that. We'll put his Huskarl on there so we know he's at the classical age. Okay, that was his action. So now we come to the Egyptian, and he's going to do one of his actions. He got this Explore. Remember, it's a random. Draw 2 more tiles than the number of players. So he's going to play that one. So he plays that into his play area. So now, since he's drawing 2 more than the number of players, he'll draw 5 tiles. Again, you may have them in a pile on the board upside down, or you may have them in a draw bag like I do. So he's going to do 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I actually got a couple more than I needed. Alright, so let's see. Now he gets the first choice. He's got mostly desert spots, a few fertile, and 1 hills. I think he'll take this hills for 2 gold and put that in his area. Okay, now the next player gets to choose one if he wants to. He's got mostly hills, 1 fertile, 2 forest, and a swamp. Those all just have 1 on them. He thinks he'll pass. He wants to wait, fill those spots maybe with some better choices. So now we come to the Norse player. He decides, gosh, does he want any of that? He decides he's going to pass on that also, so he's not going to draw any of those. So all of those will just go back to the bag, or turned back over if you have them in a pile. Alright, that was the Egyptians' turns, or play. So now the Greek player gets to play one of his cards. Alright, he's going to play a Gather. This is one of his permanent cards. Gather by resource type or terrain type. And he decides he's only got favor and gold that he can gather, so he's going to do gold. So he's not going to do it by terrain type, he's going to do by resource type. So he's going to gather 3 gold, 1, 2, 3. So he gets to take that from the supply, put that in his holding area. Now the next player in turn order also gets to gather gold, but he doesn't have any gold that he can gather. So the next player then gets to gather gold, and he gets to gather 1, 2, 3 as well. 2, 3, so that goes into his area. Alright, so that's the Greek's turn. Back to the Norse player. The Norse is going to play his Explore card. Draw 1 more tile than the number of players, so he'll draw 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, let's flip those all over. And then he he gets the first choice, and he'll take a fertile um, uh, for food and put that in his on a fertile area in his area. Okay, now the Egyptian player gets to choose one. He decides he'll take this one with 2 food on it and put it in one of his fertile spots. And that leaves 2 remaining for the Greek player to choose. And I think he decides he's not going to choose either one of those. He's just going to pass. Alright, so these will go back into the draw area. Alright, back to the Egyptian player, see what he wants to do. We'll say he's going to play this recruit 5. Now he's not going to have enough resources to recruit 5 units, but he'll recruit as many as he can. So he's going to play that recruit. He can recruit up to 5. So he can recruit any of these units except for he can't recruit any of the hero units because he's not in an age yet where he can. So let's say maybe he wants to get a phoenix. That costs him 2 wood and 3 favor. So he'll pay 2 wood and 3 favor. And then he gets to take a phoenix and put that into his area. And then maybe he wants to get a spearman that costs 1 food and 1 wood. So he'll pay 1 food and 1 wood. And he will get a spearman. Let me find a spearman down here. Puts that in his holding area. And then maybe he wants to get another elephant. 2 food and 1 gold. So he'll pay 2 food and 1 gold. Oops, I put that in the wrong thing. Alright, that gives him another elephant into his holding area. Now that's only 3 units. He could recruit up to 2 more, but he doesn't really have the resources to do it. So he's done recruiting. Alright, back to the Greek player. He's going to play this build 2, so he can build up to 2 buildings. Well, first thing he's going to build, let me get his hand of cards back out of here. He's going to build a house which costs 2 wood and 2 food. So then he gets to take a house, put it into his city, and that gives him a villager, so he takes one of his villagers and puts that into his holding area. And that leaves him 1 more building he can build, so maybe he wants to build a granary. So that costs 3 gold. No, he's going to build a market. 3 gold and 2 favor for a market. So now we found the market tile, which is right here, which will let him do trades for free, and he puts that into his city. Alright, he build 2, he can build 2, he did that, so he's done. Back to the Norse player, he's got a recruit 2 and a gather all resources. He thinks he wants to save that gather all resources for a future round. So he's not going to play that. He doesn't really have resources to recruit very much. So he's just going to burn a card or pass and just discard a card. And that's what he's going to do for his 3rd and final play this turn. The Egyptian, he's got 2 cards left, an attack with 5 units or a recruit, which he already did a recruit. This one has a god power. If he paid 2 favor, which he doesn't have, he would get to gain 1 hero from his current age, except for archaic. Well, he's in the ancient archaic age, so he wouldn't get anything for that, and besides, he doesn't have a favor to do it. He doesn't want to recruit again. So maybe we'll just have him do an attack to show that. So, alright, he's going to play an attack 5. And maybe he's going to attack the Norse player, his production area, because he would like to get that forest with 2 wood and put that in his forest. So, alright, so he announces he's attacking the Norse player and he's attacking his production area. Alright, both sides secretly select 5 units that they're going to take, so we'll just say he decides he's going to take a phoenix, a spearman, an elephant, a chariot archer, and another elephant. So he secretly puts those aside. These are these are not in his, so he secretly selects those. Alright, the Norseman selects his secretly, so he's going to take a Jarl, Huskarl, a throwing axeman, Huskarl, another Jarl, and another Huskarl. Alright, so both sides reveal what units they're taking, and then they get the battle cards that go with those units. Alright, so the elephant gets the chariot archer, spearman, phoenix, and elephant battle cards. The Norseman gets the Jarl, throwing axeman, and Huskarl battle cards, because that's the units he's taking. Each side then secretly takes one card and puts it face down, depending on what unit they're taking. So we'll say the Norseman's going to take his throwing axeman. He puts that card face down. The Egyptian player takes his phoenix, puts that face down. They both reveal. Alright, the throwing axeman gets 3 dice plus 4 versus flyers. The phoenix is a flyer, so the throwing axeman will get 7 dice. The phoenix gets 6 dice plus 4 versus giant killers. He is not a giant killer, so he just gets 6. He does have this, can be resurrected immediately after being eliminated and returned to the owning player's board. If there is a priest, there is no priest. So anyway, so he's going to get 6 dice, and he's going to get 7 since he's a flyer. So let's roll for the Norse first. Alright, here's the Norse roll. They got 2 6s. Alright, this is the Egyptian roll. They only got 1 6. So the phoenix is eliminated. That just goes back in his supply of units. Alright, nobody wants to retreat, so they're going to go again. So now they choose a card from what... He can't choose a phoenix card again because he doesn't have a phoenix. So we'll say he's going to secretly choose the chariot archer and put that face down. Norseman had good luck with his axeman, so he's going to use him again. They both reveal. So he gets 3 dice plus 3 versus warriors or flyers. This guy is not a warrior or a flyer. So the throwing axeman will just get 3 dice. The chariot archer gets 3 dice plus 3 versus warriors or flyers. So they both just get 3 dice because nobody's a warrior or a flyer. So we'll roll for the Norse first. Alright, this is for the Norse. Oh, 2 6s. What kind of luck is that? Alright, here's for the Egyptian. No 6s. So the Egyptian has to eliminate his chariot archer. So not looking good for the Egyptian, but he says he's not done yet. He's going to go one more time, so they decide to go another round. This time the Egyptian chooses his elephant, puts that face down. And the Norse thinks he's still having luck with this axeman, so he's going to keep him, so they both reveal. So again, he gets 3 dice plus 3 versus warrior or flyer. He's not a warrior or flyer. He gets 3 dice plus 2 versus mortals. Well, he is immortal, so he'll get 5 dice. And if there were walls or towers in effect, it would negate the effect of that, but nobody had a wall or tower, so that's not being affected. So anyway, Norseman gets 3 dice. So this is his roll. No 6s. The elephant gets 5 dice. 2 6s, so he won. So the Norseman has to eliminate an axeman. Still, nobody wants to retreat, so each player will select another card. The Egyptian's going to go with his elephant again. The Norse is going to select his Jarl, so they both reveal. So he'll get 3 plus 4 versus heroes or archers. This is not a hero or archer. He'll get 3 plus 2 versus mortals. This is a mortal, so again, it's going to be 3 for the Norse and 5 for the Egyptians. So the Norse will roll first. He gets no 6s. Now the elephant gets to roll. He got no 6s. So we go again for the Norse. 1 6. Now for the elephant, the Egyptians. No 6s. So the elephant is defeated. So he's got to remove an elephant. And now the Egyptian says he's going to go ahead and retreat because the Norseman still has 4 units. He's down to 2. He decides he's going to retreat, so he takes his units back to the holding area, puts his battle cards back where they go. The Norse will take his units back to his holding area. He will get the won the last battle victory point. Now, since the Egyptian was the attacker, the Norse doesn't win anything else. Since he didn't play the attack card, even though he won, the only thing he gets is the won the last battle. If the Egyptian had actually won that battle, he would have got to take the forest token from his production area and put it in his own. But anyway, he didn't. He lost. So that's his turn. So we go to the Greek's last turn or last card. The Greek player has another build 1 card. He's going to play that. And he thinks he'll build a granary. Costs 3 gold and 2 wood. So now he finds the granary, which gives him plus 2 food on a gather. Alright, and now everybody's played the 3 cards or had a chance to 3 cards, so that ends the play cards phase. So now we go to the resource spoilage phase. He doesn't have more than 5 of anything. He doesn't have more than 5 of anything. The Egyptian does have 6 gold, so 1 spoils, which is kind of weird that gold would spoil, but that's the rule. So he has to discard 1. Now we go to the discard step, so any player that still has cards in their hand decides if they want to discard. So the Egyptian has this recruit 4. Well, actually, and I don't think I mentioned this in my rules overview, before you do the spoilage phase, you go ahead and clean up the cards in your play area. So any cards you played that were random get discarded face up into under your random deck. Any permanent cards just go back into your permanent. So the same for each player. So that's a random that goes discarded there. Those 2 permanents go there, and his 3 were all randoms because that's all he drew, so they go there. All right, then you do the spoilage step, and then you do the discard. So this Egyptian, yeah, he doesn't want to keep this recruit. He's going to discard that. The Greek player, he just has this explore that's a permanent. He'll go ahead and discard that back to his permanent. And the Norse player has this gather all resources. He's going to keep that. So he keeps that in his hand. And that'll count against his card limit when they do the draw action cards phase. So that's it. I think 1 sample round's enough to see how the game plays. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I think it's a pretty fun game. A lot of people seem to have an issue with the combat. They don't like the way that they think it's too luck based or whatever. I can kind of see that, but I think it's fun. I don't mind it. I mean, you got to kind of guess what opponent your player is going to put out there, or what kind of unit your opponent's going to put out there, and you're trying to play a unit against it. So there is some strategy to it, but anyway, it's a fun game. It actually doesn't take very long. I think it's an old game, and you can tell that in the components and some of the gameplay ideas. I think if somebody could get the license for it and redo it with some more modern game mechanics and maybe an improved combat system, I think it would be a really good game. As it is, I enjoy it. I've played it both just by myself and with other players, and um, I've enjoyed it both ways. So uh, it's a good game. I don't know how hard it is to find. Like I said, I got this used probably 10 years ago or something like that. But I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.